Hi, everyone.
Hey, Megan.
Okay, we'll just give another minute or so and then we'll get started. All right. Well, welcome everyone to the March 1st Planning Commission meeting. We will be having a public hearing probably in about half an hour. We'll be continuing the public hearing on form-based code. Right now, we have a couple of other items of business to attend to. So I'd like to start with public comment regarding items that are not on the agenda. Any public comment along those lines? Okay, in that case, I'd like to ask planning commissioners, how many do we have on this call? Okay, Jathan, welcome Ellie, our new planning commission member. Sorry, my words out here. Hi, Jill. I know that Alex Daly is not able to join us tonight. And let's see.
Yeah, I don't see Shayla.
Shayla or Kate. Do you
Or
see
Kate.
Kate? Okay. I feel that we should probably wait to see if Kate or Shayla joins us because Ellie is brand new, so approving the minutes, although it's perfectly fine if you want to, but it'd be nice if we had a little bit more of a robust quorum, if that's okay with Matt and Emily.
That's fine with me. I do know from working with Ellie, getting up to speed, she's watched several hours of YouTube videos of your past couple
Oh
of
my.
planning commission meetings. And thank you very much for her work
Yeah.
doing that.
That's
So she
great.
has,
Okay.
she's a member who's viewed those meetings at this point. So,
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, in that case, let's go ahead then. I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of February 15th.
I'll move we approve the minutes of February 15th, and
Thank
I
you,
have
Chapin.
read them and I had no corrections to make.
Okay, I just have one or two little edits for clarity. They were not substantial. They were excellent minutes. Thank you, whoever took them. Do we have a second for that motion?
I can second.
Oh, Jill, thank you. It's tricky with having two screens of people. Okay, so all in favor, planning commissioners of approving the minutes of February 15th, please raise your virtual or real hand. Okay, so that's 4 and they're passed. And here's Kate. Hi, Kate.
Good.
We just approved the minutes.
Sorry, I'm late.
No worries. That's totally fine. Do you want to enter a vote on approving the minutes or not?
I did not get a chance to look at them. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's fine. We'll put you as an abstention then. Okay, so our first order of business is to hear a little bit about a proposal, a sort of proposal of a conversation at this point regarding the Glazer property. And we have a couple of folks here to represent that and tell us more about it. I do want to just remind everyone that we have a really packed agenda. And so I would like, ideally, for this section of our meeting to take no more than about 10 to 15 minutes. And it's something that we can absolutely return to, but we do need to be conscious of time tonight. because we have this continued public hearing that is looming. Okay, so Matt, do you want to provide some framing context for this? Oh, and I've also just realized that I've forgotten to do kind of quick introductions. Should we do that given how many members of the public we have? Okay. Obviously, so I'm Megan Cope. I'm the chair of the Planning Commission, and we have several commissioners with us if they would like to go one by one and introduce themselves, and then we'll have the staff and consultants as well.
I'm Chapin Kaner and I'm vice chair.
Great.
I'm Jill Pardini. I'm a commissioner.
Kate Lamar, also a planning commission member.
Thank you, Kate.
Hi, I'm Ellie Beckett. I'm a brand new commissioner.
Fantastic. Okay, great. And we don't have Shayla. She didn't suddenly sign on, did she? Okay. The other two commissioners are Shayla and I'm blanking, Livingston, and Alex Daly. So, okay, staff, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. I'm Matt Belanger. I'm the planning director.
I'm Emily Heyman.
Scott.
I'm planner. And you can reach out to me in the chat if you have Zoom questions during the meeting.
Melinda Scott, conservation planner.
Great. And then Jeff, do you and any of your team who might be here want to introduce yourselves?
Hi, yeah, I'm Jeffrey Farrell, Associates, the lead consultant, and possibly representing the consultant team.
Great, thank you. All right, so just pretty standard meeting protocols as we get started. If you could please keep your connection on mute, on audio mute anyway. You're welcome to leave your video on if you like to. You see we have some instructions being shared on the screen here. Thank you, Emily. Okay, so Matt, you were going to provide us some framing context for the Glazer property conversation.
Sure. Just a very brief introduction. This project is on the Planning Commission's agenda. It's the continuation of a conversation the Glazers and their representatives began with the Commission on January 18th of this year. The conversation that they are having with the Planning Commission is about the possibility of filing a type of development application that involves adjustments to Williston zoning. That type of application is called a specific plan. It's an option available in Williston's bylaws. And in particular, one of the constraints that the applicants are facing for their land is the town's growth management system. Specific plans in Williston are only approvable if they result in the conveyance of some kind of substantial public benefit to the town. And the applicants have discussed the conservation of some open space on the property as a potential substantial public benefit. Tonight, in front of the Planning Commission, you have on your agenda a letter from Ken Beliveau representing the Glazers. You have a drawing provided by O'Leary Burke, which shows a potential open space boundary on the Glazer property. And you have minutes of the Williston Conservation Commission linked on your agenda because the Glazers and their representatives have also had an informal conversation with the Conservation Commission. And I just want to emphasize that at this time, an application for a specific plan has not been filed. If that application were filed, it would be reviewed in a little more formal way by the Planning Commission at a future meeting following its filing. So because a specific plan can be a fairly significant undertaking, both for applicant and Planning Commission, we're certainly supportive at the staff level of having some preliminary conversations so that the applicant can sort of gauge the Commission's interest in reviewing such an application and can talk about some of the reasons they might pursue this option under Williston zoning. So we have those materials to screen share, Megan. if you'd like us to go to them, or Ken or the Glazers as you're talking. And I'd suggest turning it over to them for a few minutes. I will note that planning staff has received pretty significant public comment, much of it coming in today, about this project and about some existing land uses on the property and what might happen to them if the property was developed. We've made that, we've been archiving that. We'll make sure that we make that available to you as comment as we get it.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, Ken, I don't know if you want to take the lead or if Mr. Glazer wants to speak, however you've arranged it amongst yourselves.
I'd like to speak if I could. I will be brief. As Matt already said, we were here in front of the board back at the beginning of January. Since that time, we have been, or I have been, in front of the Conservation Commission. And it was interesting to be in front of the Conservation Commission. A number of the members of the board, and Melinda can comment on this if she likes, very familiar with the property, very familiar with the Conservation Commission's interest in open space on the property, and also very familiar with some of the history of the property, where at one time, going back 20 some odd years ago, there was a development proposal for some very significant development on the property. And it was the Glazers who stepped in at that time and were able to purchase the property. And over the last couple of decades, have made a concerted effort to really keep it in a form that resembles its historic uses of it. And part of that is that they have leased the property or allowed the property to be hayed by their neighbor who runs the, I guess it's the windswept horse farm, for the handsome sum of $1 per year. So, you know, they have tried to be good stewards of the land, and it's at a time for them now where they're going to need to move on and do something else. They are very interested in working with the town in a cooperative effort, understanding that this property is identified in the town plan as having a significant open space asset that the town wishes to preserve. So, you know, kind of a little bit of history, including the recent history of my appearance before the Conservation Commission. In response to something that staff suggested, we've prepared an additional graphic to the first one that we prepared for you when I was here. We were all here in front of you about 6 or 7 weeks ago. So just to recap, the property is roughly 97 acres. It's in the residential zoning district. The residential zoning district allows a regular standard density of 3 dwelling units per acre. After considered to constrain land under the Williston bylaw. It is served by municipal water and sewer service, which essentially means there's if you took 97 acres, and you know, we're not exactly sure how much of it is wetlands, but there could be anywhere from 20 to 30 acres. And if you took a really conservative estimate, you just shy of 70 acres of land, and if you multiply that by 3, which is 3 units per acre, it gives you an idea of the sort of theoretical development potential for this property. The Glazers are not necessarily interested in maxing that out. They would like to work with the town in a way that, as you can see in this graphic, this green shaded area just south of Mountain View Road and to the west of Old Stage Road, which is where the primary viewshed resource that's been identified as being important in the town plan, that's where that lies. And so we're sort of throwing this out as a discussion point of this could potentially be conserved. Also with the wetlands, which is more on the sort of the western, southwestern side of the property. Yeah, see where the cursor is moving right now. Thank you. Those could potentially all be conserved and, you know, potentially could come into the town's ownership if, you know, everything were worked out. What the Glazers are looking for is, you know, a greater amount of certainty than would be afforded to them if they were to go through the traditional growth management route. So we're really looking to potentially partner with the town and see if there's a mutual interest here that both parties could gain something. I did also want to comment just briefly. I know the last time we were here, one of the things that you mentioned, Megan, is how much there is on the Planning Commission agenda. And I know that your time is valuable. And you threw out, like, you know, that we should understand how long this would roughly take. So we're fully cognizant of that. And, you know, we understand your time is valuable. And that's why we're here, because we don't want to waste your time. If there really isn't any interest, then so be it. And, you know, for myself and the Glazers and the rest of our team, you know, we'd have to make some other decisions. But we are very interested in working with the town. We don't want to waste your time, but we would like to get at least some kind of a, let's call it a head nod from the commission, if this is something that you think there is some interest. So having said that, I will stop.
Okay, thank you, Ken. That's really helpful. Let's see, how about questions from planning commissioners? What more would you like to know about this at this point?
I'm interested if there's any response to the ideas we threw out last time.
Could you rephrase those?
Sure. I said that we've been getting a lot of feedback on the Planning Commission of wanting a better non-motorized transportation network, and that an east-west rec path through this property that would help connect in the end all the way to Catamount, but certainly to the existing rec path behind Allenbrook School would be very helpful. And we've gotten a lot of feedback on that. I also talked about energy and clustering of development, which Jack said he really supported and so forth. I think we're on the same page about a lot of things, but I didn't see this new information responded to those things. And the thing that I didn't mention is we have a lot of demand come to us for a dog park in Williston, and I didn't know if it's possible that that could be a piece of it. But anyway, so I just wondered, what I saw was essentially the same thing as last time, which is if we left this space open, is that a special and sufficient public benefit? And that's not enough for me to go on.
Could I respond to that, Megan?
Sure, go ahead.
So as I said, the last time we were here, Chapin, we're certainly open to the east-west connection. Knowing what I know about some of the properties, especially to the west of here, we would have to work with whatever the constraints that would be imposed by the state of Vermont's requirements relative to wetlands. If we were talking about some form of a path or a trail, something along that. Certainly there could be some potential for something along Mountain View Road if that's where the town wants to go. And I know a few years ago that was looked at. There was a study that was done, and the select board chose a different preferred alternative than actually building a multi-use path along the side of the road. But certainly a connection through the property is something that we would be open to. Again, underscoring the fact that there could very well be limitations based on the location of the wetlands. And I can also understand where the town might want some form of a road connection, whatever. And again, we would be willing to work with the town on identifying where an appropriate place for that would be, assuming that there aren't some mitigating factors that would prohibit it. And because sometimes those are there, and if you can't get a permit from the state of Vermont to put a path or a trail through there, you know, you're not going to get a permit, and it's, you know, there's not much you can do on that score. I did think that I answered the question about the clustering the last time we were here, and that we were very much open to doing that. I'm not sure what other things of those questions you felt were not addressed, Chapin.
I'll go ahead and say this because it probably reflects a lot of people. We get a lot of feedback that people really value the view shed there. And in fact, it's on the current zoning map as a view shed to preserve. And when I look at large developments like Southridge or Brennan Woods, the percentage of the land that is left open is 40% and greater on those larger developments. And some of that's because of wetland buffers, and some of it's because of wanting to leave it open for common space. And so it's hard for me to look at this map where the green part on the left is primarily in a wetland buffer. And so I'm looking at the triangle in the upper right, and that has some view shed, and our current zoning has view shed desires on it. And yes, it would be valuable to keep that open, but I don't know what would happen through the normal development process review. Would we come out with 40% open space anyway? And so are we saying it's special when it's what other developments have already done? And so I know that there's a strong value to keeping it open, and I just don't know if it qualifies. And that's probably a question for staff, how we should treat that. And I also just will express this because I know a lot of people on the Zoom will want to say this. They really would like this horse farm to remain and be a part of the scenery and the environment that people live in. And so I just know that there's a lot of support for that, and also a lot of gratitude towards the Glaziers for keeping this open this long. This is not at all my comments are not in any way against any of that. But I feel like there needs to be some conversations between our staff and you, Ken, or the Glaziers about something more specific to say, hey, with this do. If the only specificity is keeping this view corridor open, that's hard for me to evaluate. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Chapin. Matt, go ahead.
Sure. I'm just indicating that I'm prepared to say something about the last part of what Chapin said, which is why would the Planning Commission consider a specific plan, and what might that offer as an alternative to what could be approved under conventional zoning. So there's a couple things I want to say about that. One is those of you who participated in our forum on growth a couple years ago now know that while there is mapped open space that's seen as desirable to conserve in the residential zoning district, unlike our more rural rural zoning district, there is no quantitative requirement that says a certain percentage of open space must be preserved when a parcel is developed. So there's not that quantitative requirement where you must hit a certain number of acreage in order to obtain an approval. Open space is a mapped resource or rather viewshed is a mapped resource that is identified for, avoiding from development and conserving, but it's not protected in our bylaws the same way that, for example, a class 2 wetland and its buffer might be protected. And our experience in reviewing developments under our zoning is that frequently there are a number of constraints on any given parcel. And at the end of the day, the viewshed is the least constrained of the land. And often does have some development. I want to throw out there, especially for the Planning Commission and especially members who were around when we made some amendments to the town's growth management, 15 market rate and 5 affordable per year over a 10-year horizon in the zoning district where this parcel exists. So more than certainly fewer than 30 dwelling units in an initial phase. That makes it very difficult for somebody who's trying to do development to scale out infrastructure and do things like that, especially when you're building streets. And what are zoning lot subdivisions of, big sort of expensive acreage lots on shared driveways. And because we have this constraint in growth management, And because we incentive created in our bylaws that somebody who's looking for a return that might happen in a time frame sooner than 10 years from now is a little bit incentivized to do something different. And that's not something that's been thrown out by the Glazers or their representatives at all. It's me as a town staff person just telling you as the Planning Commission that absent a specific plan, there are some things our bylaw tends to push a project like this toward that may be seen as less desirable. So the last part is, Chapin talked about some details in the application and clustering and layout and connectivity and things like that. Reminding everybody just briefly that there's a conversation happening right now. There's not an application before the Planning Commission. If there is an application before the Planning Commission, the very first part of that process is for the Planning Commission to hold a meeting where they decide if they think the project could create the substantial public benefit. And so there's essentially a decision up front by the Planning Commission once an application is filed of, do you wish to accept and set up for review this application at all? And so some of that level of detail that Chapin mentioned in a concept plan sort of form would certainly be, I think, useful for the commission should an application be filed.
That's great, super helpful. Planning commissioners, can I have a little temperature check here as to whether you would like to move on to seeing some more detail, and at that point we will make a fully informed decision as to whether to move forward with the specific plan or not. And of course that would involve a lot of public outreach, public hearings and so forth. But this at this point is a bit of an informal kind of nod or shake of the head, depending on your sentiment. Okay, so if I could just, because Zoom is so tricky, if I could kind of go one by one and just get a thumbs up or thumbs down. Shall we agree to go to the next conversation phase? Chapin?
I can't answer, so all I can say is I'd need more information, and I would hope that there'd be some creative discussion behind the scenes with staff.
Okay, and just remembering that this is not a decision to allow,
I know.
going forward, right? Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
obviously they could apply for a specific plan. I'm just saying that I can't say, oh yeah, I'm likely to want to follow that process with the amount of information we have.
Yeah, all I'm asking you right now is whether you're willing to entertain the next step, which would give you a lot more information.
Yes, I guess the thing for me is that we always are willing to do the next step, because if someone applies for a specific plan, we will
Right.
evaluate it. So I'm just saying, if you're wanting a sort of a foreshadowing, I can't give one.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, Kate? Yes? Willing to go to the next step?
Yeah.
Conversation. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Jill?
Yeah, I'm willing to hear more. I think I like what Chapin's saying though too about could we connect it to some of the things folks have been talking about in the past that would be really advantageous. Things like talking about Al's land that we're talking about in Taft's Corners and not wanting to be such green space. What is it then that we might be able to use here? Because this is ideal, right? It's a village meets that urban growth center meets the rural. And I think there's a lot of potential here that I'd love to hear more about.
Okay, thank you. And Ellie?
Agreed.
Okay, all right. So you've got the green light to, at least from us, that we're willing to hear more about this. Obviously, again, that will be a very publicly engaged and transparent process. I assure you all who are on the call for this particular issue. And there will be outreach to, especially nearby neighbors. But we would like to just learn a lot more about this. Okay.
Megan, could I put you on the spot and ask you for your viewpoint on it? I know that you're the chair and you're trying to, and also Jack has got his hand up, but I would be interested in knowing your thoughts as well.
Yeah, I think I'm with Chapin in the sense that my feeling is that I would like I'm interested in seeing more detail. I am really, really motivated to save this as much of the open space in this property as possible for the town. I feel like that view is just priceless. I'm so grateful to the Glazers for holding on to it up to this point. And so if we can, I'm certainly open to a conversation about, how can we come to some form of, benefit for the town. I guess part of my interest, I'll just kind of reveal my hand here. It won't be surprising to you, Ken, is that personally, I'm interested in also seeing kind of some designs of the sort of arrangement of homes that is maybe a little different from cul-de-sacs with garages in the front. So, Jack, did you want to have one quick statement?
Yeah, just a quick statement that Chapin had raised the ongoing operations of Windswept Farm, and we are very much interested in seeing that continue. And we have been in discussions with the Mosses about that. So rest assured that that is very much in our mind as well.
Thank you. I think that was on a lot of people's minds. Okay. All right. So thank you for coming, and we do need to move on. So anyone who is here specifically around that issue, you're welcome to go about your evening. Lucky you. And thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, sounds good. Our next item of business is the attachment A to the sewer allocation ordinance. And I know most of the public is probably here about sewer allocation because it's so interesting. Every year we review the draft attachment A, as it's called, memorandum to transmit to the Williston Select Board. We review specifically, I don't know, Matt, maybe you want to kind of introduce it in more detail, but specifically has some growth implications and also kind of some prospective capacity for the town's growth. So Matt, you want to give us a little orientation to it?
Sure. So commission members, this is linked in your agenda. I'm going to try to do this initially without screen sharing so we can just go over a couple of quick points and I can answer any questions. As Megan alluded to, Williston has a sewer allocation ordinance, and part of that ordinance is that every year, on the advice of the Planning Commission, the Select Board adopts an attachment to that ordinance which identifies how much sewer capacity will be available for sale by the Public Works Director, essentially, to varying kinds of land uses throughout the town. And the way that the attachment A process and the memo that I've linked to on your agenda works is, in order to talk about how much we might make available for sale, we have to talk about how much we have. We purchase our capacity from the plant at Essex Junction. We've gone through several rounds over the last many years purchasing additional capacity. And again, without getting into numbers too much, what we do every year is we look at literally how much sewerage is flowing into that plant from Williston, because it does all enter the plant from one point and there's a meter. And that number has fluctuated up and down a little bit in the 600,000 to 700,000 gallon per day average over the last many years. We thought it might bump up quite a bit in 2021 because 2020 was such an odd year. It was both a very dry year where we had a lot of rainfall that might have leaked into the system, and also, of course, it was the year of COVID. But actually what we found is we're relatively flat from 2020 through to 2021. Continuing something I think we've been saying about sewer for a very long time, the amount of capacity used in the town went up and up and up from the moment sewer was available in Williston until about 2006. And it has really flattened out since then. Efforts around water conservation, efforts to repair in-migration of rainfall into the system And, you know, relatively, although we've certainly attached a whole bunch of new development to the sewer system over the years, it's coming online with smaller household sizes. So a house that attached to the sewer in 1980 was, you know, generally had 3 or 3.1 people in it. Today it might be 2.79. So fewer people, older people, smaller houses, more water conservation and low flow fixtures, better maintenance of the system itself. All of those things have kept the existing flows relatively low. We also take a look at any capacity that's been sold and is reserved by developers who aren't currently using it. There's about 40-ish thousand gallons per day capacity that's being held by various owners. And we look at anything that we sold over the last year to new development that's theoretically come online by now. We come up with a number. And we take that number, and because in the town plan it says we want to think about the long term, we look at how much it would look like if we needed to make it last 20 years. And the metric I typically use is if we keep selling sewer capacity to new development like we've been doing it for the last 10 years, how long can we do that? Can we do it for 20 years? And we had a relatively high year a couple years ago where my answer was it's looking more like 19. Last year it was 23. This year I'm coming out at about 27 years where the town could continue to sell capacity as we currently have it. And so in a long range outlook, that's still not that much time. I continue to make recommendations that in the town plan and for the select board consider what types of development it might want the town's land use plan to encourage or discourage. You know, you can say things like we want housing or we want jobs, but job producing industry can be either a very high user of sewer, like a brewery or, you know, Keurig Green Mountain, or it can be something that uses virtually no sewer capacity at all, you know, some sort of a manufacturer that doesn't use a lot of water. So recommending those as some long range strategies, as well as that the town continue to consider purchasing additional capacity from the plant. There may be at least one more opportunity to do that. And long term, explore ways that the capacity of the plant, both in terms of its physical capacity and its permitted capacity for discharge into the Winooski River, could be expanded. So you go from sort of the very short term of look at the way you're selling capacity from year to year, all the way out to the very long term of does there need to be another plant or a plant expansion sometime in the, you know, the 50 to 80 year range. So we take that broader look in the memo, and then we go back and we look at, well, what should the town make available for sale next year? And you can see the categories there. We have a category to sell to people who are just adding to an existing residence, like adding a bedroom or an accessory dwelling unit. We have a category for new residential. We have a category specifically for affordable housing to make sure that capacity is available to sell to affordable projects as needed. And we have a category for new commercial, new industrial. The numbers that I've prepared as a recommendation are very, very similar to the numbers that were recommended last year. We typically, over the last 10 years, have made something like 40,000 gallons per day capacity total available for sale in all of these various categories. And then the amount sold generally fluctuates somewhere between 3,000 and 15,000 gallons per day. And it's a pretty big fluctuation. One hotel could be 10,000 gallons per day all by itself. You know, one large apartment building, something like that. So we have high years and low years, and seems that given what's on the horizon and what our various folks have in the pipeline, something similar to last year's allocation should be sufficient. And I see Chapin's got his hand up, and I can stop there for now.
Go ahead, Chapin.
I just wanted to say I read it in detail and I totally concur with the recommendations. And I wanted to thank staff for being so detailed. I think we got very detailed with the sewage projection back in the 90s and early 2000s, and we were worried we were going to run out very quickly. And what's happened since 2006 is it's been very flat. And also I know we have some developers on this Zoom, and I feel like all those low flush toilets and other things that were put in were very helpful. To me, in terms of recommendations to the select board, we don't it's a problem if we get many breweries. It's not only the volume of water, but what it does to the needs of the treatment plant to deal with what comes. So that's the only thing on the horizon that I would watch out for.
Well, I think we've had a net loss of breweries lately. Is that correct?
Actually, Burlington Beer continues to manufacture
Oh,
here
okay.
in Williston, but they closed their tap room.
Right, right.
They may actually expand their manufacturing here at some
Okay,
point because they'll
fair
have the
enough.
physical space. Yep.
Okay. And do you require a formal vote on this, Matt?
So the way I have it, before I ask, recommended motion is on the final page, that the select board adopts attachment A to the sewer allocation ordinance with the sewer capacity amounts for the fiscal year 2023 as stated above. So if you were to go into the memo, this is the final page, page 12, right-hand column, proposed FY 2023. And those are the numbers I very briefly summarized tonight.
And you could take my comments to be that motion as it's printed in the agenda or in the attachment to the agenda.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a second? Thank you, Jill. Planning commissioners, all in favor of approving the movement of the attachment A over to the select board?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, that looks unanimous. Thank you all for your attention to that.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Showtime. We are going to reopen the public hearing. Just a reminder that the purpose of the public hearing is to consider amendments to the Williston Unified Development Bylaws in accordance with the goals and policies of the Williston Town Plan, which specifies that we should explore the options of form-based code for tap corners, the growth center. So I see that the first item here is a staff report, and so I'm not quite sure who's leading that.
I can speak for a moment on that, Megan. You know, I had toyed with preparing a more lengthy sort of presentation, but we're in our third hearing, and so I think most of the Planning Commission members and many of the members of the public and stakeholders are aware of what we're working on here. But what I did want to go over really quickly was following our last meeting. On the Friday after our last meeting, I sent an email to the Planning Commission members with a couple of follow-up items. And we've communicated individually with a few of you. I used the email to welcome Ellie Beckett to the Planning Commission. And I wanted to highlight a couple things that when either during tonight's testimony or should the Planning Commission move into a work session, there were a couple of items commission members wanted to make sure had been fully discussed and addressed. Those at this point stand at a few items in the document I sent you from Chapin. And Chapin, I'm going to summarize really briefly. Please feel free to chime in if I miss it. More green space, more call outs to solar and encouragement for solar, and deeper door yards on some of our street sections that have just the 5-foot door yard section. And so you have your document there. We had a little bit of back and forth last time about building height and building form standards, particularly minimum story height and maximum story height in the districts. And just to remind everybody, in our various districts within the form-based code, we have 2 districts that have a 3-story minimum and a 5-story maximum. And we have 2 districts, sorry, we have, 2. And then we have 2 districts that have a 2-story minimum and a 3-story maximum. And that's where it sits in the draft today. If there was any further commission discussion on story heights, either minimums or maximums or both, we would want to resolve that. Lastly, commission members did ask for staff to take a look at any projects that are in some form of process currently, but could potentially find themselves affected by the form-based code. We identified 2. One was the proposed redevelopment of the Essex Alliance Church site by Chris Snyder, and Chris is here tonight and has spoken to you about that. That project has been through pre-application, is scheduled for growth management review at the end of this month, and only then would be in a position to file a discretionary permit application, which is the point at which projects are vested in the version of the bylaw under which that discretionary permit is submitted. The other project we identified was the Aldi grocery store and residential building on Wright Avenue across the street from the CVS and the Plumbers and Masons property over at Taft Corners Park. And that project also has been through pre-application. We've, because it has a residential component, we asked for a legal opinion about what would it take for an application to be submitted that was complete and whether growth management was required. We provided a link to that legal opinion on your agenda. And the short version is that we were advised that we can accept an application that fully designs the grocery store and identifies the residential component as something that would be done later. That could be considered a complete application, could be filed prior to going for growth management, because if we waited for growth management, it would happen in March of next year. So staff, as far as I can tell, is aware that the Aldi project will likely move forward under the existing bylaws of the town. We have not yet received the discretionary permit application, but we've been working with the applicants and expect it in the coming weeks or days. So those are the ones that I think we wanted to identify and go back to. Chapin's comments, the building form standards, and just FYI to the commission in terms of projects that are in process that run some risk of being caught up in the change to zoning that adoption of the form-based code might cause. So I'm really just going to stop there. I wanted to just make a brief statement again of gratitude to the Planning Commission for hanging with us and working through this process. The Planning Commission's been working in this project for over a year and a half at this point. We had really significant public process last year during April, May, and June, including the development of the vision plan document and its endorsement by the Select Board on July 27th. And then ever since then, I think almost every meeting of the Planning Commission has dealt with one or another draft aspect of the form-based code or the bylaw amendments or the official map or zoning map amendment that goes along with it. This all comes about partially because the town plan says that the Planning Commission should consider form-based code as a tool as it monitors the performance of its existing code in terms of the achievement of the the downtown with a strong pedestrian orientation that the town plan has called for since at least 1990. The Planning Commission chose to prioritize development of this form-based code at a work plan session back in 2018 and has been working on it ever since. And what I can say as a staff person for you who has worked on all of this drafting with our consultant team, with CCRPC, with our citizen planners and everyone else, is we believe that we've given you the strongest possible tool set to create a walkable downtown with a strong pedestrian orientation that Vermont law allows a Vermont municipality to consider. We have a form-based code, we have a regulating plan, we have architectural standards, building form standards, we have an official map underpinning all of that. We have planned public facilities in the forms of new streets, green spaces, paths and trails, etc. We've given you the whole tool set. It is a major evolutionary step beyond the way zoning is done in Taft Corners today. You're in your third hearing, taking public testimony tonight. Your steps beyond the hearing closure would be to probably have a short work session to clean up any other things in the draft folks have questions about. And ultimately, if you choose, you would vote to transmit this to the Select Board for their consideration, and then they would have to hold their hearing process. I'm not saying all of those things need to happen tonight. I'm just identifying as the steps going forward, and staff's here to answer questions as needed.
Thank you so much, Matt. That was super helpful. Okay, so what I think I would like to do is open up an opportunity for remaining public testimony. We have heard a lot. We have responded to many things, and we will incorporate further comments into our work session. And hopefully that will be tonight. And just to kind of reiterate what Matt said, this is the first step of a again, transparent, deliberative, and participatory process. If you have some perspective that you would like to share, and don't feel like it has been adequately acknowledged, please do speak up tonight. But remember too that you have additional opportunities to do that with the select board directly. Okay. So, I'd like to shift to the public testimony section. And to begin, we have a comment letter from Donna Roser. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Would you like to make some comments, Donna?
I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I had some concerns, and I would strongly like to see some sort of formal policy by the town in regards to affordable housing, protocol, oversight, because I don't think the town really has one. So that would be something that I would strongly like to see down the road. But I think I just personally, I've been very disappointed with what I've seen over the years, the changes in the town and how it's transformed the town and the look of the town and the character. And I just have a feeling that this is going to be a continuation of it. That's it.
Okay, thank you. I will just point out that this, as Matt mentioned, is a pretty significant step away from the current development practices, and also the sort of look and feel of things would be quite different than what we see today. This is not just a continuation of business as usual. And of course, that's what also causes some friction, right? Like, it's not easy to change. It's not easy to envision something different than what we have in the physical environment right now. And so our role is really to try to balance the desires that have been stated, as Matt pointed out, since at least 1990 in our town plan for a strong pedestrian orientation, and the things that go along with that, things like density, and although it's measured quite differently in form-based code, the style of the buildings, their relationship to the street, which is really important in form-based code, and the overall look and the way that we as humans might feel actually in those places. And so I do just want to reassure folks that form-based code will be different. It still might not be what you're looking for, and fair enough, but I did want to just make clear that this is not just accelerating or kind of bringing on more of the same kind of style, at least in the growth center. Matt, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think you summarized a lot of it really well, Megan. I will say that that the part about the look and feel, I think, is a place where the commission was especially responsive in looking at the architectural standards and the building form standards. That idea we talked about almost a year ago about uniquely Williston, and and coming up with something that didn't look like every other place, form-based code or not. The more I take a look around at other places that have growth centers or have form-based codes, and the more I look at the architectural standards in Williston's draft, the more confident I am that you will start to see an identity as buildings build out under a code like this. Some of the things about the way primary and secondary materials are used and some of the building elements that are required, I think really might achieve that.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm happy to take some comments from the public. Chris Geffen, Gefkin, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Megan. So all for more green spaces. I think I identified that last time. And certainly in favor of the minimum 2-story, maximum 3, and not the 3-5. I just think the buildings will be too tall and will detract from the beauty that is Williston. I have another comment. How, and kind of a comment and question is, I hear look, feel, and density. Is category something that's identified? Some type of category where we're looking at the type of business coming in to, I feel like we have Shaw's, we've got Hannaford's, we've got Healthy Living, blocks away from Hannaford's and Shaw's. I feel like that's density wise, that's overkill for that type of business. And yeah, and my question, wouldn't it be better served to have some type of housing, or if you're looking for a place for low income housing, that might be better served to have something there where it's accessible to all those businesses and grocery stores.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, we appreciate your comments. I think we may have missed a couple little keywords there. It was a little choppy, but I think we got the gist of it. And I believe you spoke at the last meeting as well. Is that correct?
I did, yeah,
okay.
But not specifically to all these.
No, I understand.
Yeah. So my question is that covered in the code somewhere?
That's a good question for Matt.
Sure. Where I think this is best addressed in the code is when you have a minimum of 2 stories instead of a minimum of 1 story, you're really saying to those single site, single building, single tenant retailers that they need to come up with something to do on an upper story. And with the kind of demand that we see and that we talked about in the market study that fed into our vision plan, it's very likely that what's going to make sense on upper stories is residential. That's not automatically affordable housing, but it's a way that housing is integrated into any more commercial development that's desired in Taft Corners, and a way that Williston can address the region and the state's housing crisis in a compact development form where those new units are walkable to the point where they literally might be upstairs, but certainly across the street or within a few minutes walk of services and groceries, restaurants, et cetera, whether they're existing already or built new. So, when you start saying you really want upper stories, you're saying to somebody who's a retailer, you can be here, but you need that upper story. And if you're not looking to just give that away or leave it empty, probably one of the things there's more of a market for would be to have that be a residential thing. And I should also point out that in terms of the proliferation of all kinds of retail in Taft Corners, there is only one place in the entire form-based code area where a building has to be retail capable on the ground floor, and that's buildings that front along the 800 feet of Wright Avenue, the CVS side street off of Route 2A. You can build a purpose-built all the way down to the ground floor residential building anywhere else in the district. So people talk a lot in form-based codes about wanting mixed use and wanting people to be able to walk to things. I think in Williston, between an acknowledgement of the current built form where there is lots of retail and retail capable space sort of interspersed throughout, and where the market is so heavily for residential, it didn't make sense to require anybody to do retail except in that one place where the town wanted to maybe get a little more of a Main Street focus.
Thank you for that clarification, Matt. It's really helpful. Okay, other questions, please raise your hand. Marcy, just one moment. It is, if you can use the virtual raising hand, which is in the reactions icon with the little smiley face on the bottom of your screen. In general, it's a little better because it immediately pops you to the top left box in my screen, which means I definitely see you. Whereas if you just go like this, you could be on screen too, and I don't see you. Maybe someone else will, but that's a great way to make sure. Okay, Marcy, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry about that. So I did speak at an earlier hearing, and I will say again that I'm really grateful to everybody for working on this code and trying to make Williston a nicer place to live. I really appreciate all that work. And so I want to reiterate that I'm really looking forward to more parks. I'd love to see playgrounds. I would love to see that. And so this is one new thing, and it's not a deal breaker, but I just wanted to register my opinion that I don't see the need for the pitched roof thing. I think maybe that's like, I understand the distinctive Williston look thing, but I don't, to me, it feels a little bit unnecessary and a little bit like a Disney World-ish, dare I say. And then I'd also like to say that I myself am not skittish about 3 to 5 stories. And I think I heard our planner, Jeff, talk about how the beauty that's Williston is all the open space that there is, and try to keep the housing concentrated so we can keep that beautiful open space. So that's my, thank you.
Thanks so much for that perspective, Marcy. That's super helpful. I'll just quickly answer this because a lot of people have mentioned the question about the pitched roofs, and that was very clearly in response to public feedback that we received. One could say an earful about dislike for some of the flat roofed buildings that have gone up recently in Taft Corners. And there's not a lot of love for some of those particular buildings right now. And so the pitched roof requirement, with various parameters, was in direct response to public feedback. However, we are now taking more public feedback, so thank you. And we appreciate the perspective. And this may be an item that we bring in our work session. Okay, we'll have Al for some comments. I would just like to suggest, Al, that since you have provided us quite a lot of testimony already, that if you could make sure that whatever you bring to us tonight is something new, right? And just again, because we are in our 3rd round of this public hearing, but please go ahead.
Sure. Thank you for the time. I just want to make sure, because it wasn't mentioned, I sent the letter, and it was late today when I got it to Matt, about 4:30 today. We sent the letter, and I don't know if you folks have received it. I haven't heard any word from him or anyone on staff that the letter was sent. That would have made my speech a lot less hearty tonight. But anyway, I drafted up a letter, and I know I'll try to be as quickly as I can. Maybe I'll just highlight it. Matt, is there a way that we could get the letter to the members of the Planning Commission, or is it too late?
It is on there.
Yeah.
I saw it.
You did see it.
Just dropped the link in the chat too.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's posted on the website for tonight's meeting agenda, Al. I got it up
It was
there.
never brought up. No, nobody mentioned it, so I just want to make sure that everybody got it. I don't think it was that scary. It was, you know, again, it thanked everybody at first. I want to thank everyone for all the hard work. And again, there's so many things to talk about, but I've laid it out. There's 11 items that I think need to be looked at and make sure that everyone understands it. It's still unclear to me on a lot of things, and I can, you know, let you guys read it. Really, I mean, street layouts. You know, I would like the planning commission to require buildings on both sides of the new roads, not just one side. That's a, you know, you're all talking about affordable housing. Well, to make affordable housing, you have to build affordably. You can't put buildings on one side of a road and then call it affordable, because it's not. The roads are very expensive and you need to build on both sides of them. Block sizes, I'm kind of, I think more discussion on block sizes needs to be talked about. On my property, the largest block size that was shown was 1.5 acres. Yet on the Cottonwood Crossing, the average block size was 3.5. So, you know, I think more discussion on that. Shared parking, very unclear to me. It says the new code requires that all new parking lots with more than 30 spaces are required to have at least 40% of those spaces dedicated to the general public. What does that mean? That anybody and everybody from the public can park in that, so that when I'm only allowed one space for a one-bedroom apartment, that the public can come and park in that space and the people that are renting from me can't? I don't understand that. So again, more clarification, though, that maybe I'm just, you know, not reading it correctly, but so my recommendation would be to allow all, you know, all parking for the general public on the streets, but allow the interior parking for the building, the people that live in the building. And then it talks about maximum parking requirements for residential housing. The maximum allowable parking is one space per bedroom. That basically means that if I have a married couple that work at two separate jobs, they can't each have a car because I can't provide them with a parking space. So I'm not going to be able to rent to them. For the non-residential uses, the maximum allowable parking will be one space per 1,000. I'll use an example. If I put a 2,500 square foot restaurant or pizza shop in with 60 seats, does this mean, and I'm asking this question because I don't understand, if it is, then we're in trouble here. Does that mean I only get 2.5 parking spaces for a 2,500 square foot restaurant that has 60 seats inside and maybe 5 or 6 employees? Where do we park these people if they're going to come to the restaurant? So that's something to think about. Building heights. I would like the planning commission to allow some single story buildings. I know it's probably not going to happen, but many commercial uses do not mesh with residential housing over them. A mixed commercial uses are important, but we can mix it by putting them next to those single story buildings possibly. So I just want to request some single story buildings. Footprint sizes, we talked about that briefly, but this is more specific to, like, in the urban general and the urban general 2 zones, both restrict the maximum building footprints to 15,000 square feet. Again, I'm using Cottonwood as my kind of comparison. In Cottonwood, we have 4 buildings which would all not be there at that size. We have a 16,000, we have a 21,000, and we have a couple of 25,000. So, or 20 plus thousand. So I think that maybe 25,000 square foot footprint would be better to serve this new zoning requirement. And as you guys talked about the flat roofs, I mentioned that as well. I would like the planning commission to allow flat roofs or some sort of flat roofs. As a contractor, as a builder, we look for places to put mechanical equipment. It's best on the roof rather than on the ground next to the building, especially with some of the requirements in these new regs. So something to think about. Private open spaces. The new code states that all new development must have 20% private open space inside each block. However, the diagram at the top of the page labels it 15%. So that's just something that needs to be looked at. I'm concerned that with these small blocks, building, parking, alleyways, there will be no space left for private open space, or cost of that space will have to, be passed on to the residents, which will only further drive up the cost of the housing. So, I think the planning commission should let developers decide if they like to incorporate private space into their design. Most of us will, but maybe not at that with that stringent of a requirement. Street furniture, just a quick check. I'm not sure if anyone on this is kind of almost a little bit of a joke, but I'm not sure if anybody on the planning commission did this, but we called the manufacturers to check on the cost of the benches, the trash cans, and the bike racks. The bench cost is $1,361 plus tax plus shipping. The trash cans are $2,516 plus tax plus shipping, and the bike racks are $1,771 plus tax plus shipping. Very, very expensive. Again, affordable? No. Expensive? Yes. If that's a requirement, it's going to drive the cost of housing up. Project review, the project review committee. I read that the only approval a new project would need is just a building permit for the project review committee. That committee consists of the zoning administrator, the public works director, and the fire chief. In my opinion, the regulations, plan creates a lot of new unnecessary infrastructure and block designs with all these created lots of new challenges for the fire department, since the fire chief and the public works director are key decision makers in this approval process. I would be interested to know their thoughts. Have they been weighing in? I haven't seen anything from them. And I'm trying to go through this quickly. There's one more item. Regulating plan. I appreciate the changes in the regulating plan that was presented at the last meeting, but I am still concerned about the amount of infrastructure that is being required. As I mentioned above, the roads, the buildings, only one side. Again, I'm reiterating a little bit, but just trying to make sure I catch everything on the ladder here. Anyway, I'll try to end it there. I've probably said enough. I'm sure you folks will get the letter and you can read it and hopefully agree with me on some of the things anyway. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thanks for your comments. And I apologize that I personally did not see your letter because I prepped for the meeting before it was submitted.
Sure.
But we will certainly take it into account.
Thanks, Megan.
Okay, great. Yeah, I see Brian Forrest hand up.
Yes, thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. I apologize for not attending any of the other public hearings. I would like to also agree with Marcy about pitch roofs. There are many buildings, there's so many buildings that are already there with flat roofs. Trying to shoehorn a new aesthetic into there will create, I think, chaos. And pitch roofs are almost impossible to discern from street level. You mainly see the cornice, and you don't really see the roof. So I don't know the value of it. But putting a pitch roof, and look at any of the Aldi's. If you had to put a pitch roof on a building that size, it would be a humongous cost incurrence. For what purpose, I'm not really sure. Drainage from pitch roofs are always a problem. Snow sliding is a problem. I would suggest scrapping that part of the code. I think we're looking. You look at any of the towns in Vermont, Bristol. There are no pitch roofs on there. They're all flat roofs. Their buildings are right up to the lot line, and that's kind of the standard for our towns. So to introduce a new standard is pretty alien to the existing architecture that's there now. I would also think that the streets are grid pattern has been rather ruthlessly applied to the existing land there at Taft Corners without any thought of varying the size of the blocks, not having every street a through street. It just limits the projects that can be built there. I also would agree with Marcy about playgrounds and open spaces. We need to, as a town, identify the ones where we think they're be more useful, and set about a capital project plan to own those parcels, and not rely upon developers to strong arm the developers to provide those spaces for us. I haven't really gone through the plan. I'll do that some more, and I'll send my comments in. Thanks, Megan.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, appreciate it. John, I see your virtual hand is raised. John Marcotte.
Yeah, just quickly on the pitched roof thing. I also am not in favor of requiring pitched roofs on everything. I think the taller the building, the less important it is to have a pitched roof. Lower building might be more logical. I think making it a general requirement that you cannot have flat roofs is going too far. And I wonder if everybody is misinterpreting what the town feedback was. If you go over across the corner to like the Finney Crossing area, you have very large buildings, but they're almost all standalone buildings with flat roofs, and they kind of all stand up separately. Here, because of the block nature, the buildings are all going to be tied in together. They're going to be much closer. You're not going to have that looking across an area at a big building with a flat roof. So, and when I look at towns around us, you know, the older buildings, which I think people love, like Essex, Burlington, Richmond, places like that, they all have flat roofs. Somebody mentioned putting the mechanicals on the roof. Once again, it's a very practical thing to do. So I would suggest that you might want to reconsider making that a mandatory thing and maybe give some options there, especially with building heights and things. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Okay, thank you. I'm certainly hearing the message of ditch the pitch here. We can make note of that sentiment. Okay, Jeff Davis, your turn. You're muted.
Better? Thank you. So I'm filling in for Jeff Nick, and those are deep shoes, and he's way more articulate than me and way more patient, and he's also got an Olympian daughter, which I've got 2 daughters that I adore. But anyway, thanks for, I'll just take a minute. Al Cynical said most of what I would have to say. But if you look at our letters of February 1st and February 14th, which are in the record, I think you get our position that don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. That Taft Corners is working, and a lot of people don't like boxes, and a lot of people don't like Walmart, but it's feeding the town a whole lot of tax revenue, almost 30% of the town's budget. And so, you know, we want to try to work within that context and make those businesses, I think we all have an interest in seeing them succeed. So 2 points. One would be in the area north of Marshall Avenue, give us flexibility because Jeff Farrell, he and I have had some disagreements, but I respect what he's done, and his, I think his contract and his scope that he was hired for didn't require him or ask him to look into existing easements, water line easements, all kinds of wetlands issues, all kinds of stormwater issues that exist on these properties, and it doesn't matter whose property it is. And so we as developers have to work through those things. And if you look at our letter, what we're asking is that the Planning Commission write into this ordinance that the DRB or whoever, the staff, the DRB, or back to the Planning Commission, has the authority to adjust these regulations for a project that everybody agrees, including the town, is good for the town. And right now, it's cast in concrete. This road's going to go here. This road's going to go here. Maybe there's 50 feet. You can adjust the road, but it basically is I won't call it tic-tac-toe, but it basically is a sketch of Taft Corners where someone's drawn some lines north and south and east and west and created blocks where blocks don't exist. They might go through the middle of a existing project or an existing easement or existing water line, whatever it is. So give the DRB, if that's the right place or the right vehicle, the ability to tweak these regulations without going back for a bylaw amendment. Bylaw amendments take a year, 2 years sometimes, depending on the town that you're in. So that's one thing. And that would address a lot of the things that Al Senecal said, where there's something that doesn't work for good reason, and the DRB or whoever would have the ability to adjust that without changing the rules and going back with all kinds of public hearings and warnings and a year or two of delay, which a lot of times will cause a project to go away. Second point is south of Marshall Avenue, the pattern is set. To try to change that and to try to argue that it doesn't exist or doesn't succeed, by the way, it's succeeding very well, is to say, let's put 2-story buildings or 3-story buildings between PetSmart and REI. It just doesn't work. I mean, nobody wants to live there. So Jeff Farrell and I have had some great debates about, he thinks our retailers are going to fail in the next 20 or 30 years and we need to draw in some blocks and redevelop. I disagree. I think our retailers are doing great. I've got more information than he does. He might have information that I'm not privy to, but give us some flexibility down there. Allow us to Taft Corners is fragmented into 4 sections. Unfortunately, Route 2, Route 2A just split Taft Corners. And I don't see a lot in the plan that ties those 4 sections together, unfortunately. And that's a tough assignment. Do you bridge it? Do you put overpasses, underpasses, whatever you do? That's very difficult, but I don't see a lot to tie them together. So take each quadrant as it is and say the southwest quadrant, which is us, and you're asking us to build a downtown area closest to Taft Corners, which makes sense with height bonuses and stuff like that. But consider that as a development on its own, and you have a major arterial vehicle road going through that. That's Marshall Avenue. Now, I don't care if cars are nuclear or battery operated or gasoline operated. They're not going to go away in Vermont. It's rural. So we have a grid pattern of blocks that are envisioned there for the next 50 years that are going to have multiple curb cuts on Marshall Avenue. Well, Marshall Avenue is a major east-west arterial road, traffic carrying major road network. Does that make sense? I don't think so. It might be that way in 100 years, but it certainly is not going to be that way anytime in the near future. So respect what's gone on to the south of Marshall Avenue. The real boundary of Williston's growth center is probably the interstate someday. Maybe it'll go beyond that, but right now it's the interstate. And we think that if you tell us that in the circle around Harvest Lane, or the one lot that's left to between Home Depot and PetSmart, that you're going to build a 2 or 3 story building and put an intersection through the middle of it, that's just not reality in terms of development. And so if you do that, then we freeze and we don't do anything. And maybe that's okay with a lot of folks, but remember that the town budget is funded by what's going on at Taft Corners. Almost 30% of the revenue to Williston comes in from Taft Corners. So let's not, I won't beat on that point, and I know a lot of people disagree with me on that, but give us flexibility to do some of the things we've been doing while we also try to do some of the things near Taft Corners that make sense and that Jeff has come up with. So please read our letter. Please give it consideration, and please give flexibility to your boards going forward to make decisions on behalf of local citizens that will consider the facts on the ground instead of a plan is planted in place that if you can't meet the rules, you can't get a permit, because that won't help anyone. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Davis, for your comments. Okay, I am looking at the time and I'm thinking that the Planning Commission would appreciate some time to have a bit of a work session, but I'm also willing to take a couple more comments and not surprised to see your hand up, Chris. Go ahead.
Yep. Well, thank you. I appreciate, again, the time that everybody has participated in this. And I am, I think, you know, I am concerned really with several points and raised them before, some of them before, but I think that it is important to note, and I kind of like adding a little bit of reality to a couple of the points that have been brought up. First off, and I think this is important for the Planning Commission to consider, but the block size, a footprint size of a building of 15,000 square feet. And the reality, what does that look like and how does that get used? So if this is a 4-story building, approximately you can essentially fit about 15 residential units per floor. If you use 1,000 square feet, it's allows for common areas, it allows for some smaller units and some larger units. If you do that, what ends up happening is that we are going to increase the amount of surface parking if we are going to provide 1 parking spot per unit. Right now, when we have somewhere between 18 and 20,000 square feet, preferably 20,000, we can actually fit the number of parking spots underground for the number of units above. So it solves, it creates a lot of benefit for the person living there. It also creates a benefit in that we're reducing surface parking areas, because we do need to consider that at least 1 car on a per unit basis. I think that's an extremely low minimum. We don't like building at that level, but it is a low level. So I do think that you need to think about this footprint size as to the specific reality. One of the things that I was surprised at the last hearing is that the Public Works and Fire Department are going to be involved after the select board process, or maybe during the select board process after you've approved it. That seems contrary to what we have done, and what I think is something should be taken into account now. You're defining a regulating plan, which defines the street layout, but yet not having the Public Works and Fire Departments review and sign off on the regulating plan. So to me, that's two substantial groups that have a lot of knowledge, experience, and have preferences that should be considered prior to finalizing the regulating plan. If you proceed without their input, then I think you're going to end up having to revise the regulating plan to meet their concerns or challenges associated with it. So my recommendation is to work with them now. Let's not move I wouldn't recommend moving the regulating plan forward until you have sign off from those two substantial groups. The third piece that I'd like to just reiterate is what Matt brought up, is you have 2 projects. We're talking about 2 projects that are getting caught in the planning process. And I understand that the Planning Commission, your commission, has been working on the form-based code for about a year. And to be honest, I started working on our project over a year ago, back in, I think it was December of 2020. Of designing a neighborhood. We go through the process, we refine it to make sure that it meets the land development regulations. We spend lots of efforts, and then for the code to be changing during that review process and our inability to proceed on our application because of the process, the growth management process, has limited our ability to move forward and vest our rights. And so I do think that the Planning Commission should put in, and I'm requesting this, put in some language that allows for the two existing projects that were previously approved to utilize the land development regulations that were in place at their pre-application process.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Matt, are there any burning issues that have been raised that you would like a chance to respond to, or would you recommend that we move in, close the public hearing and move into our work session?
Well, so first, a decision with the gravity of closing the public hearing, I'm going to leave to the commission members.
Fair enough, yes.
For sure. Not my place. A couple of things I do want to mention. If you go into a work session, I think there are some of these things we can address a little bit, and I'll reflect a few of them back to you right now. One is the question of coordination with fire and public works. Just remind everybody in the room that our consultant team included Rick Chelman, a transportation engineer, and we did hold meetings with Chief Aaron Collette and Public Works Director Bruce Hoare about the street designs that are called for within the form-based code and laid out in the pattern they're laid out in the regulating plan. Generally, the street dimensions, in other words, the public right-of-way that the regulating plan calls for, is as much or more than the size of right-of-way that's called for in the current public works specifications. It's just sometimes configured differently or involves elements like street parking or tree lawns or all of those other things. But just wanted to remind folks that there has been consultation with those other two departments, and that the question of the administrative side, the whole other end of this process where a permit is being considered, it does establish a project review committee where Public Works and Fire are brought in again. But their level of input and what happens when you're doing project review on a particular site development is quite different from what happened when Jeff Farrell and Rick Chelman talked with those department heads a little over a year ago about the street configurations. So, having gone and witnessed a project review committee meeting under a similar structured code in Winooski, the planning director, the DPW director, the fire chief are sitting down, they're looking at a fully designed projects. And at that permitting stage, what they're doing is they're working out the kinks of, the code doesn't say anything about where the hydrant exactly goes on the site. We need to start moving the hydrant and swap the hydrant in the utility box. Let's make sure I can get the truck into that driveway. Those kinds of things happen at project review. On street furniture, those things that Al brought up, it's absolutely true that street furniture is expensive. I do want to note that we call out some specific types and brands of street furniture, but we allow an or similar at the discretion of the zoning administrator. I don't want the commission members to think that we are locking people into a particular brand. We've just picked ones that are of the appropriate sort of design, durability, substantiality, that kind of thing. And there can be some flexibility on that. I think I had maybe one or two other things. Parking, it takes some work to wrap your brain around shared versus reserved parking and how that all works. If any planning commission members have questions about that or want us to run some examples, I think we could do that pretty easily for you. And then I heard a comment about 15,000 square feet being a relatively small building size and creating some design challenges. I think where Chris was going was about the ability to park underneath a 15,000 square footprint is more challenging than if you have, say, 18 or 20. We have talked internally about a staff that 15,000 feet is a pretty small footprint. That's true. We are certainly available to talk to the planning commission work session or otherwise about what we think the parameters are for a footprint size that would still fit within the way this code is laid out. And lastly, because we heard a couple comments about the pitched roof idea, and as you said, Megan, ditch the pitch. I just do want to remind everybody that we do have two major exemptions to the pitched roof requirement. One of those is for a solar ready roof. In other words, we can't mandate that you put solar panels on it, but if you show that you've designed it to accommodate solar panels at a certain level, you can do a flat roof that way. You can also do a flat roof if it's going to create a private open area in the form of rooftop deck or garden space for people who are living or working in the building. We do have some allowances for pitched roof with a flat section in the middle that can hide mechanical. And I do want to remind folks that pitched roof was something that was discussed around coming up with something that's sort of unique for Williston. But also pitched flat or otherwise, we heard a lot about the challenge of screening rooftop mechanical fully, and pitched roof with a hole in the middle can do that. And we saw that at one of our example projects over at Bayberry Commons. So just a couple things. There's quite a bit of nuance around a lot of those design requirements and quite a bit of flexibility around building form and design. That said, big picture, you do have footprint sizes, you do have story limits. Oh, one more thing about pitched roofs to keep in mind is that when somebody does choose to use a pitched roof in a building, they can have an attic story of livable or usable space within that pitched roof. And we have some very specific requirements around that, both minimum and maximum roof pitch and story height and things like that. So you might have to put a pitched roof on a certain building if you don't want to chase down one of those other exemptions, but you get more livable, marketable, usable space out of it. And that was a balancing consideration for the commission. So couple of summary items there. I did not address everything that everybody just brought up. Happy to answer any other specific questions. And or if commission members, while still in hearing, want to address anything that I sent to you in my follow-up email or leave it, that's fine. We're at your service here.
So Megan, Jeff Davis, might I ask one question and then I'll be quiet?
Go ahead.
So first of all, Matt's been very forthcoming, and we don't always agree, but he's been really great about sharing information. But let's say that somebody brings in a project, us at Taft Corner South or Chris or Al or somebody else. And the way that this is back to having flexibility for either the staff or DRB to modify or adjust the regulations. We bring in the first project, everybody loves it. Planning Commission loves it, DRB loves it. But Williston doesn't have a stormwater utility. So we say, all right, we have to put a pond in to treat stormwater to meet state, town, and federal regulations. And oh, by the way, it's going to be right where Jeff Farrell has designed a new block street that's going to go in 50 years from now. We have to go back and get a bylaw amendment from the town, which can take 2 years. I'd love to hear Matt talk to us about a little bit about how that could work. That's all. And I don't want to prolong the hearing, but I'm just trying to make my point that flexibility when all parties agree is really important.
Do you want to address that, Matt?
Sure. The first thing I can say is that having things like this be bylaw amendments does make it harder to change them, as opposed to, an application before the DRB or something that can be done administratively. I started off tonight by saying, what we've put before the commission is what we think is the strongest set of tools to achieve the town's vision. And that does mean that some of those tools are by design and as drafted less flexible. I will say that there's a version of flexibility around streets in the regulating plan. When you zoom in some areas, you'll see these lightly hatched, what we call level 2 streets. They're generally streets that go through an existing building, where you could do something that's otherwise subject to the form-based code on a lot that has one of those level 2 streets. But if you're not touching the building that street conflicts with, you don't have to build that street at that time. You plan around it, but you don't build it. So it's a question for the Planning Commission. We've given it to you as a draft that does make the removal or movement of streets on the regulating plan a bylaw amendment. And we've not really thought of a good way to change the bylaw amendment process to guide to state that the Planning Commission, must take those up or must take them up in an efficient manner or process them promptly. I struggle with a way to do that within the very bylaw that the Planning Commission works in. I do think that it is accurate to say that some piece of the Planning Commission's workload under this adopted code could very well involve these sort of individual bylaw amendment requests where somebody wants to move or eliminate a street that's on the regulating plan for any number of reasons. They encountered a constraint. They identified a project they want to do that, as Jeff said, maybe everybody really likes it. Maybe it really achieves something great for the town, but there's this street in the middle that's not compatible. I think for Planning Commission members to think about a little bit is if that desire to remove or relocate a regulating plan street happens, do you want me dealing with it or my predecessor or my successor dealing with it administratively as part of the permit? Do you want to ask us to look at some sort of a DRB application process? Do you want it to be a bylaw amendment? That's the spectrum. And Jeff's right that what has been put in the draft is the most inflexible version of that. And I see Taylor's got his hand up too, which means he's probably got some piece of chapter and verse that he knows better than me that he'd like to fill us in on.
I'm going to provide a more technical answer to Jeff that I know he may not be happy with, and then I'm going to float an idea that we have not really talked about or vetted for consideration. So in response to talking to Mr. Davis and Mr. Nick, one of the things that you'll see in the current version of the form-based code that we've changed, that's in pink text, is previously, the zoning administrator had the ability to move a road on the regulating plan up to 50 feet from where it's shown in the regulating plan. We've moved that to 75 feet, or proposed that as 75 feet to provide more flexibility. We didn't go as far as what Mr. Davis is requesting, and here's why. It really has to do with the official map, and it really has to do with what state statute requires them of an official map. And so what state statute, I'm going to say this in summary, what state statute says is really the town to the best of its ability on the official map, which the regulating plan really is the official map. So it's basically the same map. Statute says on the official map, the town has to be as specific as possible about where it's going to require public infrastructure in the future. And so from our perspective, we felt like once we got to 75, we started to get in a place where we weren't comfortable as staff meeting the letter of the law in terms of providing as much specificity as possible on the official map. Even 75, I mean, we're pushing the bounds of where we feel comfortable. That is less flexible. The official map in and of itself is less flexible. So that's my explanation part. Oh, actually, I'll amend that in one other way. We think the official maps are really important in terms of ensuring as the town that you get a block pattern. You know, it's really the only way to require that you're going to get a block pattern. You know, otherwise, you know, developers really can plan their land much more so and decide where those roads go. You know, the tools that you have in your bylaw are what you have now, which are fairly weak. You know, you can ask for interconnection or require interconnection, but that's more of like point to point. That's less grid pattern over a large piece of your town. So that's my explanation about flexibility, about the official map and why we are where we are. My idea for Mr. Davis and the Planning Commission to consider would be about, you know, essentially building in a requirement. I'm not sure if perhaps the bylaw and the town plan. I have to really think about what document, but you know, building in a requirement for the Planning Commission, much like they do now with specific plan, but that when a regulating plan bylaw amendment is requested, that be streamlined, that there be sort of a starting clock that the PC puts on itself to consider that and make a decision. That's something that I don't know. I feel like, you know, you can put on yourself and require of yourself, and you can make it specific to Taft Corners and specific to the official map and the regulating plan. We should think about specifics a little bit more if that idea has any legs, but that's what I can offer you.
But Taylor, what is your fear if it's in control of the town, whether it's staff, DRB, Planning Commission, whatever? It's not in the developer's hand. If the developer brings in something that everybody likes, and Jeff Farrell has drawn in something that doesn't work anymore because of easements or whatever it is, wetlands, what's the fear? Because it's not in control of the developer. The developer can propose it, but whether it's DRB staff or Planning Commission, why shouldn't they be able to amend it or under a certain set of criteria, certain findings where they would say it meets the goals and, you know, et cetera, what the form-based code is about? Why go to a bylaw amendment process? I've been through those. I'm getting too old. I mean, it takes years for those things to get done for many reasons. And so there's no risk here that a developer is going to sneak something through that the town didn't want. And that puts the decision for people from the town that serve on commissions with boots on the ground under today's circumstances. What is the risk there for the town that some developer is going to run them over and do something they don't want? I don't understand that.
So Jeff, I'm gonna give you two responses to that, and I'm gonna first say that yeah, I'm sympathetic to what you're saying, but I'm worried about two things, and I'm gonna try to explain this, even though I'm not a lawyer. One is the point I made about the official map statute in terms of specificity, and the town really needing to, as much as it can, specifically identify the location where infrastructure is required so they can obtain it potentially, either through accommodation by the developer or by negotiation with the developer, or, worst comes to worst, going to court. I don't think it's ever going to happen in Williston, but my second concern, and this is where I'm It's harder to answer because I'm very much not a lawyer, but it's about procedural due process. You know, statute's pretty clear about, you know, the process to amend an official map. And that's really a bylaw amendment. It's pretty clear about that. And so, and I think the intent of that is to ensure procedural due process in terms of the parties that are informed about that bylaw amendment and the hearing process that goes on between the PC and the select board. I know that's probably not a satisfactory answer to you, but that's what I'm worried about.
I'll close by saying I disagree, but thank you for articulating that. Thanks.
Thank you, Taylor. That was really, really helpful. And for those of you who may not know Taylor, he's with the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission. Okay. I think, Chapin, do you have a comment?
Can I move that we close the public hearing and move into a work session?
Thank you. Yes, you may move that. Any second?
I can second.
Thank you, Jill. Keeping tonight's pattern going. Okay, all in favor of closing the public hearing and moving into a planning commission work session?
Yep.
Everybody thumbs up. Great. All right, so that is, we are now finished hearing public testimony, and I would like to address a couple of, I think we have a couple of outstanding issues that we can do some work on. How would the Planning Commission most like to begin this? We've got a couple of kind of friction points, but we've also got our expert staff and consultants here who can help guide us. And I wonder, well, maybe we could start with the question of because Mr. Snyder is still here, maybe we could consider the question of the Essex Alliance Church property. So I'd like to check in with all the planning commissioners and see what your thoughts are on, you know, should we explore some options around modifying the stated protocol for timing regarding the Essex Alliance property. Another option is to consider essentially excluding it from the boundaries of the form-based code. And of course, the other option is to indicate to Mr. Snyder that he needs to conform to the form-based code, and we're just going to move forward. So if I could check in with sort of a temperature check, what are people thinking and feeling about this particular issue?
I mean,
go ahead.
Personally, I'm sympathetic, and I would say that I would be willing to consider excluding that property from the form-based code. I will also say, and this is something past that property, but that I'm getting more concerned about this form-based code based on things that we've heard. So, I mean, I'm just going to leave it there for the moment, but those are my 2 cents.
Okay, thanks. Chapin, your thoughts?
I wasn't quite ready to comment.
Oh, I'm sorry, you don't have to.
I can just say that I'm totally sympathetic to Chris, and I also I think I saw, Chris, that you were on our early charrette sessions last year, and so I think you may have been working on this since December of 2020, but you also have had about 10 months of knowing this sort of direction in general, but I totally understand that you've had to move ahead with planning. And I also am really big on fairness. And so whatever our fair thing is what should happen. There, I'm disappointed because you know that I have other, I didn't know about the Essex Alliance Church property plans as we were working on this until they came to pre-approval, preliminary plan. And so I have had a lot of ideas for that area that I thought were the benefit of the entire area. And the one that I wouldn't want to I feel like it should be a negotiation, whatever happens. Because the one thing I wouldn't want to let go of is a connection from the existing bridge rec path to the existing rec path within Finney Crossing, and a pretty direct one, because people using that rec path are often going to be coming from the developments that are off of Route 2A north of there, and they're trying to get to the business centers south of there. And so it shouldn't be a neighborhood ride, it should be a path through it. So that's the one thing that I'd sort of not be willing to let go of for sure. So to me, it's a difficult thing and there should be negotiation. How's that?
Fair enough. Okay. Other thoughts from Planning Commission members? Okay, so I know this is tricky to be put on the spot, right?
Can I say one other thing
sure.
about that? To me, this puts up the point that there are things that I don't like in the form-based code, and there are things that we have to resolve
Sure.
still. And I've taken notes tonight, and of some things I would recommend we would change right now. But to me, it's hard on developers to have a shifting regulatory environment. And I would like us to get this in place, imperfect as it is, with a promise to act quickly on revisions as needed, because that at least we're trying to make a very important and large shift in how we do development in the Taft Corners Growth Center. And I feel like getting it on the books so that everybody knows what the starting place is on the new rules is very valuable, even if there are flaws in it that have to be addressed.
Well said, thank you. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'll just kind of share my personal thoughts on this, or my individual thoughts, I should say. I do feel like there was plenty of time to respond to form-based code, and it was pretty clearly in the works. It's been mandated in the town plan for a long time that we would explore it, and there was a lot of publicity and outreach about it, and participation. That said, so to be honest, I don't have perhaps quite as much sympathy as Chapin does, but he's a super nice guy, so maybe that's my frame of reference. And I think, when I first saw the preliminary plans for this development, I was disappointed by how car oriented it is. Just having a lot of garages out in front, lots of curb cuts. It doesn't feel like it just feels like more of the same stuff. And that the sort of arrangement within the space to me also feels a little bit like kind of warehousing. Folks who like the senior housing just feels a little bit like a kind of separate entity and maybe disconnected from the other residential areas. So those are my kind of individual views. Honestly, my preference would be to move ahead with form-based code as it is. And there's got to be a line somewhere, and that would be the line. But I do also feel like we need some further conversation and clarity on this before we go ahead. Matt, did you indicate something that you wanted to say?
No, not in particular. Just to remind the commission that we've talked about a couple ways of approaching this, and if there's interest in flexibility, I can go over the various, whether you bring specific plan back in, you set vesting for a certain period of time at a different level of application, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I would like to hear those again.
Well, just to review a couple things the commission has thought about and done in the draft as it sits today. One is the commission chose not to allow for the specific plan option in the form-based code district, which could allow somebody to change any number of different bylaw requirements through that process. And we talked about a very different kind of specific plan earlier tonight. I would, just because not everybody works in the DRB world all the time, I'll just remind folks that the way vesting works today is it happens when an applicant has filed a complete application for a discretionary permit. In most of the world, what we call a discretionary permit would be like a final plat or a final site plan or design review. It's a very big, thick set of plans that are very close to being ready for construction. So it's not just a concept plan. The engineering has been done, the utilities have been placed, the building has been laid out and designed. It may not be 100% architecturally designed, but it's a very full-featured plan set that somebody probably wouldn't invest in preparing unless they were pretty sure they were going to be able to build what they were designing. What we don't vest in Williston is pre-applications, which are concept level reviews. And the way Williston approaches the pre-application filing is it actually says in our bylaw that multiple concepts are encouraged as a basis for discussion with the DRB about how various styles of development that might happen on a given site would or would not conform to the bylaws or might run afoul of other requirements like public works specifications, et cetera. Typically a pre-application might be a page or two of plans with a generalized layout and some idea of number of dwelling units and type or type of business, et cetera. But it's not much more than a sketch. And in fact, many communities would call what we call pre-application sketch plan. So it's meant to be easier to file because it's meant to be a conversation starter with the DRB. And it, it's the kind of application that can be prepared fairly quickly and submitted fairly easily. Obviously, Williston's development review process is not the only thing that an applicant is undertaking when they're hoping to build a project in Williston. They have all of their design considerations, all of their financial considerations, their state permits, financing, everything else that goes on. And so I will say, from when somebody files that pre-application to when they're ready to file that discretionary permit, they're doing an awful lot of other work. So in the time when Williston's Planning Commission is considering adopting a really big evolutionary step, a really big change to the way zoning is done in this fairly intense part of town, mechanically, if you wanted to provide some flexibility, you could, for some defined time period, roll back vesting to pre-application, or you could limit it to residential projects and roll it back to the acquisition of growth management allocation, which is something that's, you say pre-application or growth management where it's required, et cetera, et cetera. So I think before we look into exactly how to do any of that, it's important to know if the commission wants us to do that. And as you brought up initially, Megan, beyond specific plan or changing the point at which vesting happens. The other way you do it is you just map the property out of the form-based code district and say, normal Taft Corner zoning district standards would apply here. It essentially goes back to being a blank slate with the text of chapter 41 and all the other reference chapters of the current Williston zoning bylaws applied to it. So you're back to units per acre density. You have some general statements about streets connecting, but you're not regulating exactly where they show up on the regulating plan. You're requiring open space and urban parks and things like that, but not to the extent of having drawn them on the plan, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a shift to something that's more text-based, far less prescriptive, far less exacting about exactly where things go and exactly how big they are and how much, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's the decision that's there. Again, much like the regulating plan, what's drafted before you is the strictest version, no specific plan, no vesting till discretionary permit. And yes, it's in the code area. Does the commission want to do anything different with that?
So having heard these laid out, I wonder if other planning commissioners have additional thoughts, reactions. Jill, I'm looking at you.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering a little bit about how much is this timeline overlapped, or how close are you, Chris, in your project to breaking ground, or is it really running you amok? Because I lean more towards Megan in the sense of like I'd like to move forward with something that I think is really great for the town and not get caught up in individual specificities. And I'm conscious that you've put in a lot of time and effort and work to make something that previously fit under our plan. So I don't know. I'm torn. I think I still either need more information or I guess move forward as usual, as we're doing now.
Okay. And Ellie, sorry to dump you right in the deep end here, but do you have some thoughts that you'd like to bring in to this conversation?
I think I'm kind of with what Jill just said. I think my inclination would have been to move forward, because my impression was similar to what you had said, Megan, that it had been in the works for a long time, that everyone had been consulted with, but I also know that this is my first meeting, so I would love any more information that I can get.
Okay, thank you. Chapin, go ahead.
I'd like to, if you want to let Chris speak, I would want him go before me and Kate for sure.
I was hoping to hear from planning commissioners first, and then Chris, if everybody's okay
Kate,
with that.
Kate, do you want to go first, or do you want me to go?
Oh, it doesn't matter to me.
Go ahead then.
I understand your point, Megan. I don't necessarily agree with it. I feel like as a planning commission member, this is going very fast. I feel like it's hard for me to keep up with all the changes. And although a developer should be maybe more aware of it than say a resident, I don't know how, with everybody having to work their full-time jobs and do everything they have to do every day, they can keep up on this stuff that has been moving very quickly. So to me, there is some sympathy that should be applied there. I did really, I don't know if everybody read Donna's letter, but I thought it was very, brought up a lot of good points, and something I think we need to be thinking about. So.
Okay, thank you. Chapin, go ahead.
So I was going to say that of the options that Matt talked about, I am not in favor of excluding it from the district. And I would, to me, the last, as far as I would go, is possibly changing when we define vesting. but I think it'd be much more productive. I feel like I want to go ahead with form-based code as quickly as we can for all the reasons we've talked about, including its imperfections, and then keep working on those. I do feel from Jeff Davis's comments, and actually from everybody's comments, that we need to have a streamlined process for making some changes along the way, and that to some extent would benefit Chris, but doesn't exactly answer his question. This is really just a desire, and I don't know how to channel it. Back in the early 90s, when Citizens for Responsible Growth were fighting the Pyramid Mall Company and in the end, Maple Tree Place came out of that. It was negotiation between residents and a developer to come up with something. And there were compromises, like there's box stores on the south end, but then a different design, including housing to the north on the Maple Tree Place thing. And what we have discovered as a planning commission 25 years later is that what was done at Maple Tree Place is more adaptable to what we want for a pedestrian space than the other things that have happened in the Taft Corners area. And so I just wish there were some kind of chance for the reasons why we want form-based code to influence Chris, and Chris's constraints to influence us to some kind of compromise. And I don't know how to channel that, but that's where I'm at.
Okay, that's really helpful. And just thinking through the potential process, if we did agree to vest the project in at pre-app, you know, thinking realistically, as far as like numbers and growth management, like that, you know, there's still going to be a need for form-based code for this project at some level. Is that correct? Because of growth management not providing the entire allocation? I'm asking you, Matt.
I take it you are.
Yeah.
So what would probably happen in a project like this, the Essex Alliance Church project, is there's an application for growth management allocation, and there's a partial allocation made, which leads to the applicant being able to move forward with an initial phase of the project. But that phase, you know, given our experience with other large sort of master planned communities or developments, it might involve, for example, platting out the streets for the entire project and then a plan for development of some portion of it. So thinking about what might be approvable following a growth management allocation and discretionary permit under the current bylaws, you might have some future buildings that are not covered by that initial growth management allocation and are subject to architectural standards or building form standards in the code. And that would play out differently. I think if there was a complete plat for the streets and lots or streets and large parcels in between them for the project that was part of a phase one approval, you would probably want to go back and adjust the regulating plan to just match what had been platted, understanding that those had just been created and had some vesting. For example, future undeveloped portions of Cottonwood Crossing that have final plan approval today, you know, that block pattern was simply reflected on the regulating plan. The backside of Cottonwood would probably do the same thing here. But you would probably impose the architectural and building form standards on those new buildings that weren't part of that first phase, that didn't get into that first round of growth management. So it's a little bit of a complicated question of exactly what and how much of a big project like this would be understood as vesting under the current bylaws, when the approval would really be for a first phase.
Okay, that's really, I know it's a lot, right? It's a lot to hold in our heads at once, and you know, it's late.
Yeah.
Yeah, but let me turn then to Chris and say, what, in the spirit of negotiation, what would, what can you put on the table in terms of, this project and, kind of meet us somewhere in the middle.
Well, thank you for considering this in this, what I consider pretty unique scenario. That I will say, I've been developing properties for over 30 years now, and I have never been caught in between a zoning modification. Okay, so in 30 years, this hasn't happened to me. So it doesn't happen very often. We understand, and I think, one of the things that both Andy Rowe and I have prided ourselves on over the years is following the rules and using the rules as a basis for the development of our properties where we're providing housing for Vermonters, right? That's really all we do, is provide housing to Vermonters. So going back on that and thinking about rule following, if we go back to when I was initially having this discussion, and if you look at the timeline that Emily provided in the chat, you look at that and you say, okay, in January through May, there was a public outreach and visioning discussions. I was privy to one of those meetings and participated in one at the end of April. The vision, however, wasn't published or endorsed until July. I had already been, basically, on August 14th, I presented to the HAC our preliminary sketch plan, or whatever we call it, the pre-app. So that meant in July, we had already prepared that application. So when I see the vision plan and we understand what the vision is a bit, there's a loose regulating plan. And then come October, which I've already achieved approval, you're now presenting to the Planning Commission the first draft, which probably had the regulating plan. And I, to be honest, wasn't participating in those meetings, wasn't really asked to participate in those meetings, even though my project was part of that at that time. Then here we are, a few months later. So I think, it's, we're in how basically you should have said, and I guess my argument is, hey, back in January 1 of 2021, you should have said every project from now on is, we're not going to take any new development review. But I appreciate that the town didn't take that approach. So I'm not complaining, I'm just saying it's created this ambiguity period, and that we did. And if you look at our overall site plan, there are a lot of the form-based code components associated with it. Yeah, the roads may not be exactly squared off and cubed like other areas. There are entrances, and I see Jeff's perspective has a very different perspective than I do. So I'm sorry, Jeff, but yes, our plan does have a lot of form-based code components to it. And, I feel like we're creating density, building homes in areas that you guys wanted, that is within the growth center, that has been defined as the growth center. And I do think that we have some position here where we have pre-app, and for 5 months, we're not allowed to proceed to our discretionary permit because of growth management. And so we have this 5-month period of time where I would have submitted before the end of this last year, I would have submitted a discretionary permit application, but I can't. Because
right, but that's like a long known constraint of developing in Williston. I mean, the growth management has been in place for a long time. So it's like when you submitted something in whatever, August or whatever, like you knew that that was not going to move forward. And I guess what I'm pointing out is that, you know, these discussions were ongoing, the design standards were clear. Like it seems like it was kind of a risk for you to you know, continue under the old plan, when you saw that we were really committed to you know, to moving in this direction. And so, you know, that was a risk that you took, and so it you know, may or may not work out in your favor. I guess that's what I'm saying here. And
but I don't think that's, Megan, and I understand that perspective, and there's risk in everything I do, right?
Of course, yeah.
I wake up every day and all I think about is what is my risk tolerance today, right?
Sure. No, I get it.
So that's what I do. I understand what those are, but I think it's also unfair to say, like, I knew that in, you know, February that you guys were going to finalize the regulating plan that didn't take into consideration my application.
Well, pre-app, but yes,
Pre-app.
okay.
You didn't take into my, you didn't take my perspective on it. You just basically said, we're going to utilize the consultant's perspective, and we don't care what people have already done. So you guys have already sort of made the judgment that you didn't really want to take into consideration something that has already had a public review process.
No, that's what we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
We haven't come to that conclusion. We are discussing it right now.
But I think
Chapin,
the way the regulating plan has been developed is clearly saying, we don't care what you already did. We don't care what the DRB said.
No, the purpose of the regulating plan is to put down on paper what is our ideal, based on the notion of creating a strong pedestrian element in the downtown area. That has been a stated goal for a long time. And so the regulating plan is not a matter of like, let's see who we can squeeze. It's a matter of like, what do we want in our town? And how do we want our town to be organized? And so, you know, I just disagree with that cast that you're putting on. We were not out after anybody by any means.
I'm not saying you're out after.
Let me have Chapin.
Yeah, can I just follow up on that, Megan? And I appreciate that, but you do have to admit that the Planning Commission and the consultants and the staff really, although there was a pre-application approval, those plans were disregarded in development of the regulating plan.
Well, I didn't see them until we already had the regulating plan, so.
Well, but that's not my fault. Like
okay, but I'm just saying that, like, it's not like I saw your plans and was like, ha, those are out the window. You know, that is not the case, because to me it seemed like when I saw them, I was like, oh, this is really out of line with what we were hoping that this area would generate. And that was such a great opportunity for like the first, you know, form-based plan informed development to hit the ground. Like that would be so awesome. And instead it was like tons of garages and And just kind of the way it was arranged was not really in line with what we were hoping for. But I don't
But
want to
when did you
continue
get,
this.
when
This
did
is
you
not
take that
productive
into
at this point.
consideration? When did, I presented that in July. And
Okay.
why didn't somebody come to me in July and say, hey, time out, Chris, you're presenting something that is not in line with the planning commission perspective.
Okay. Well, I don't know that, and that's in anyone's job description, but okay, let me turn to Chapin here.
Yeah, I don't, the first thing I want to say is I don't want this discussion to derail our entire thing about adopting form-based code. So I think we should move on to it fairly soon. The other thing I want to say, Chris, is if I had known you were working on a plan for that, it would have been really important for you to know, have more conversation. But I didn't learn till September. I think it went to the DRB in late August or September, right? And I didn't know until on the DRB's agenda that there was I thought the Essex Alliance Church owned that property and didn't have current plans for it. And so it caught me by surprise. And it was in July that we accepted the vision, which has basically the regulating plan sketched on it. So to me, I had already adopted what I thought was going to happen with that, not knowing that you had any. And so it's too bad that we crossed paths. And I feel like it's not anybody's fault. Nobody was trying to exclude you. And I don't think you were trying to go around our process, but we definitely didn't join together. And I just feel like we should join the best we can at this point. And the ideal thing for me would be if you said, oh yeah, that's a great plan, I want to switch mine, but I realize that's unrealistic, but there may be somewhere it's a compromise. And so I really just want to say both perspectives are probably fine and we should do our best to make the best of it. But again, I don't want this conversation to hold up. If we implement form-based code, we can still take separate action about that even in all sorts of ways.
Okay, it is almost 9:30 and I would like to pull this meeting toward its closing moment. Al, I'm going to ask that you hold your comments because we have had a lot of testimony tonight and we need to make some decision at this point about how we're moving forward. I think it sounds pretty clear to me that we need to continue a work session. And I would like to propose that we do that on March 15th and that we will, in the meantime, have some time as a planning commission to digest some of the material that's been provided, some of the additional testimony that we heard tonight. We can ask staff questions about different scenarios and get some clarity on those issues. I would suggest that we not, obviously, at this point, move the form-based code amendments to the select board. And I realize that that does have some implications with the timing. But I think that, in all fairness, that we need to put our heads down and do some work on this, fix and review some of these questions about parking, about number of stories in buildings, a couple other things that have been remaining in our undecided pile. So, Matt, any final words for us tonight? Directions for the next session, anything like that?
Yeah, as the staff and consultant team, we'd really like to help the planning commission sort through those remaining areas. And I think there's a model we could follow similar to what we just talked about around this one issue of, vesting in one particular geographic area, which is, okay, you heard this comment, here's what the code says today, here's some ways you could change it in response, maybe even to the point of in the interim between the meetings, us trying to pull you collectively on some of that. But what I really need help with, we can review the meeting and the minutes and everything that was brought up tonight, but individual planning commission members, if you could reach out to myself, Taylor, Emily, Jeff, or all of us with, here's something I'm thinking about that I think might, you know, for my full support might need to be different, or that I'm concerned based on what we've heard in testimony that we should address. The sooner I know what those things are, the sooner we can try to prepare you a written down slate of options. One is leave it as is, and then there might be change it this way, or this way, and give us that direction to help focus your conversation. We can come back on March 15th. I think if I'm right, we've tried to leave that agenda untouched otherwise, because we had hoped it might be a joint meeting with the select board. We will defend that agenda with our very lives and leave it so you have the whole time to do a work session. It is likely, based on select board and staffing schedules, that the next opportunity to be with the select board might be April 19th. So just keep it in mind. It's my wife's birthday. Where else would I rather be? So it goes, the life of a municipal planner. But really, please, email myself or other members of the staff. I heard this tonight. I'm worried about the bylaw. Either can you point me to more information about this? Because sometimes we're hearing that things are inflexible, where I think when you get into the text, you may find that it is a little more flexible. I brought out the brand of the benches, et cetera. Sometimes there may be something we can prepare that says, well, here's 3 options. Collectively, as a planning commission, is there majority interest in any one of these? And then we can move on. So we'll try to do that for you. Thanks again, everybody, for everything and being here and sticking with us. And we'll keep chugging along.
Great. Chapin, are you going to make a motion to adjourn?
No. Before I make that motion, I just want to say that I agree with every pink change in all those chapters that were changed. So I wanted to thank the staff for that, and I hope it might help have less hanging. And I will write, I'm going to address stuff just to Matt, because I want to be careful about open meeting law. And these are thoughts from the input of this meeting. I'll just send it to Matt, and he'll decide what kind of options from all the input he gets from each of us, what kind of options to send back out to us. And I don't mind if whatever I send in is published as an attachment in the next agenda, but the way I want to deal with it, I think, is to write comments to Matt.
Sure.
Okay.
That's great. Yeah. And if the rest of us follow that model, it would be a good central clearinghouse for the different comments. Okay, great. And you can start off, Matt, with the statement that Alex supplied, which I didn't bother reading because we didn't quite get to that point. But if you want to add that to the materials that you're collecting, I think that would be
Will do.
Great. Okay, thank you all for your patience, your continued thoughtful and civil engagement. I appreciate it. And I'm including everyone in that. And even when we disagree, I really appreciate the fact that we can be civil. And it sounds like we will see you in 2 weeks. So
great.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.